Welcome to Around the Fence Post, where grit meets growth, stories spark change, and real conversations build stronger farms and futures.
So, to introduce to Around the Fence Post, first time guest, Mr. Brent Croom from Dyer, Tennessee, a umpteenth generation dairy farmer from down here in West Tennessee. So, must have been here since some year back in the 1800s to have been around as long as they have out here, which is very cool to be that historical in any one place. And he's also really a leading auctioneer in the region and a very busy man. He's a real estate broker. He's a father to two or three. Is it three?
Three of them.
Three of them. And a real community outreach person that I admire from my side, because I have no idea how he's got the time. So we wanted to talk to Brent on a variety of different topics, but really just let him tell his story and just see where the conversation goes from there, while we learn a few things about markets and everything that he's seeing from his end on the front side of all the auctions and all the real estate stuff. So, Brent, welcome aboard.
Jacob, thanks for having me today. Appreciate you bringing me on to talk around the fence post this morning.
I'd like to start with the soil. Let's start with the roots there as a farmer. Give us a little of that family history, the farm history, and then kind of what you guys are working on as you grow forward with it, and then we'll get into your side hobbies.
So, my family settled here in northern Gibson County right after the Civil War. Some things happened there where they had to break loose, and some people moved. But anyway, my great great grandfather settled here in North Gibson County, where of course they had the family cows, and the family milk cows and whatnot. And then my great grandfather built our Grade A dairy barn that we milked into last year in 1948. They bought the farm there where Mom and Dad's at in 1937. And then last year I was able to buy back the farm that what we used to call and was my granny's farm. And so we'd traced that back to about 7 or 8 generations back. So the history of the roots there run pretty deep on the family side. To get, to just kind of give a little background on that side of it. We've been here for a long time, been milking cows, not nonstop since 1948, because my great grandfather got killed by a train of all things. And so there was a few years there where my dad wasn't really old enough, and my grandfather was out doing some other things there that we didn't milk cows here in probably the mid 60s and probably most of the 70s. But Dad started back in 1981, and we've milked in great granddad's barn until last summer when we got our new parlor up and going.
Have you been pretty excited about that new parlor? Has that been what you thought it would be and done? I've seen a few of the pictures, and always seems like it always seems like a great atmosphere happening in there.
Well, it was a job, number one. That was a complete job to be able to take that parlor out and put it back in and get it going, and still trying to continue to milk 110 cows through the old barn and trying to put that new parlor in right behind it. And so, I got to give credit to my boys on that. Man, if it wasn't for my two boys, we couldn't get the things done that we do around here. And I've got some new help this year, but now last summer, I got to give them boys credit. My middle child, Carter, there's no telling the amount of hours that kid worked, on a daily basis, and the hours that he put in to get all that accomplished.
That's incredible. And your oldest, I thought, did he go to auctioneer school already?
Clayton did. Clayton went to auctioneer school. Clayton graduated auctioneer school last July, and so he's got his license now. Of course, he's hanging those licenses with us at Top Tier Auction Company, and so he's very actively involved in both sides of it, the farming side and the auction side.
That's really cool. Well, I'll try to keep us on timing. So, what what do you think has changed and what hasn't? You've been, well, at your age, you've been doing this or seeing things from a different perspective for the last 20, 25 years. What's your perspectives on farming? You've got young boys now that were at the age you were, as you were really, I won't say when you started, because we both know that's not how this works, but as you start looking or shifting that perspective with looking at how dad's looking at things, how do you feel it's the same, and how do you feel it's different for your boys having that same conversation with them that your dad had with you?
Well, my dad was never what I'm gonna call a risk taker, and so he was always just basically, hey, I want to milk my cows and be happy, and just kind of live my life. Me, I'm a little bit more of a, hey, let's try something. If it don't work, I don't know how we're going to fix it, but we'll figure it out. We'll burn that bridge when we get there. Let's try it and see what happens. And fortunately for me, I've been able to have some other businesses outside of the farm that has been able to bring in some income that's probably give us some opportunities that people don't get. Been able to diversify to some other things, to have some other revenue streams coming in. And I'm telling you, that's the only way that I see anybody's going to be able to sustain this agriculture deal is they're going to have to find something to diversify. They're going to have other revenue streams coming into the farm to be able to, compete, to be able to stay active in the farm. I mean, I just don't see how anybody can rely totally on the grain market. If you're relying totally on the grain market the last 2 to 3 years, I mean, I think your bottom lines have dwindled. You've eat up a lot of equity. And you've got to have something to bring in some money in those years where you've basically been losing year after year. And so to relate that back to my boys coming into the farm, I've told them, I look down and I say, okay, boys, how much money do y'all want to make? And well, the sky's the limit, but you have to do something to generate that revenue. You have to do something to generate that income to bring it in so that the farm can be able to pay out. As we bring these younger generations into the farm, you've got to grow. You've got to do something to be able to pay them, because if not, the farm cannot sustain. I've got some friends that's got 2 or 3 boys. Well, they can't pick up any more acres. Their equipment's maxed out. They've already got hired hands. Well, they want their kids to do well. Everybody wants to see their children do well, but they can't grow no more. And so how do you feed 6 families out of the farm that, have just been able to feed 2? You can't. You've got to do something to diversify, to bring some more money in, to create another revenue stream. And so that goes back to, they say, well, why do you do all the things you do? Well, if the row cropping has a bad year or the dairy farming has a bad year, maybe the auction, side of it can pick up and help. We've gone into custom chopping. We've gone into, my boys are selling goat panels, gates, hay feeders, just whatever we can do to try to generate an extra income. Is it inconvenient? Yes, it's inconvenient. But if we sell $1,000 worth of goat panels one week, guess what? That may have paid the electric bill that week, and you hit a dry spell, and it takes every bit of it in our world to make it all work.
It's funny you said that. Mom and I were just having that discussion about insurance, pay your insurance on a quarterly or 6-month, whatever. And we were just talking about that a couple of days ago. Like, it's just one of those things that you just assume that somewhere you got a call cow that needs to go and make sure you can make that lump sum. And you're exactly right. It can kind of just fill in those valleys and peaks that you have where you can level out a little bit. So that is pretty awesome when you've got 2 out of the 3 for sure planning to be there. So I love that you're having that. So just continue with where you're going with that thought, because that's feeds right into the next one on what are young people needing to know. So there's 2 different pieces there. There's those of us young people that are working multi-generational farms and still trying to keep those profitable. And then on the other side of it, you have people that are still trying to get started, that maybe grandpa had a farm, but it got sold, and these kids are still trying to find a way find a way to farm.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you, I have a difficult time with this one. Whatever you do, if you're a young farmer trying to get started, don't run the old man off. And we see, I see it all the time in the dairy groups and the farm forums. People, I'm going to say this is a two-sided answer. Number one, don't run the old man off, but the old man also needs to know how to let the young kid in. And that's a double-edged sword, because you're going to have to give these younger generation some rein to make some decisions, because if not, they're never going to feel trusted, or they're never going to feel valued. And listen, they're going to screw up. And I'm telling you, I know farmers who are 40, 50, 60 years old, and they screw up too. And so we've got to give this younger generation a little leeway and give them a hope, because if you're going to let your kid work on your farm till they're 40 years old and pay him $10 an hour, $12 an hour, $15 an hour, he's nothing but an employee. And you're going to have to let that child or that younger generation know that they're bringing a value to it, and that they've got something there at the end of it. I tell my boys all the time, I'll say, look, I bought this, but it's ours. It's not mine. It's ours. And it's ours to use. It's ours to do whatever with. And I think that, and they understand that. And one of them come in the other day, and he said, I made us some money today. And I said, that's a good thing. I said, that's what you always need to try to, make us some money, because he understood that even though it did come in, that it goes into our ag service account, that his paychecks come out of that ag service account. And what he was doing was feeding himself, not just me. And so I think you got to instill that in a lot of these younger kids too.
They like that, and they talk about it. It's almost a little bit of a cultural, where in America we don't think that way quite as much. And I think it's an important way to think, where it's the family, that you're trying to build that wall around your entire family, not just around yourself as an individual, because you can build a lot more wall with a lot more people involved with it. I think Dave Ramsey talks about it a little bit, but not at that level, because he doesn't get as multi-generational because of he doesn't understand ag. We know that, but
right.
That's it's an interesting dynamic that I do appreciate. That's the mindset coming in. Makes a lot of good sense, and gives you early buy-in from the boys. But this is a great spot to segue right over to the custom chopping, man. You've kind of dabbled in it. Like every year it seemed like you had a new chopper, and every year you sold it and bought a new one. But then last year, you made that 40-mile trek up here to North Cottage Grove to make that. And I don't know how far you go the other directions, but that's a pretty. Yeah, where'd you see it? Where'd you see the opportunity there? Not that it's not. I definitely agree with you, but like that, like you pulled the trigger and figured out how to put a crew together, kind of after that, to make it come together and work.
Well, the whole custom chopping thing. So of course, the Diller boys were here and they chopped, and then their family kind of picked up and moved, and so I kind of grew up with the oldest boy, Daryl, and of course they're all in Middle Tennessee now, and Daryl and I was just always really good friends. Well, they got into the chopping because they had dairy over here. And so then they kind of grew into chopping a little bit too. Well, I always went and helped them, and we kind of worked it out. I'd help them, and they'd chop our silage, and whatnot. And so the expense on us wasn't that bad. Well, when I knew they were leaving, I said, hey, in 2 years, I'm going to have to turn around and buy all this equipment back. And I said, I'm not going to pay somebody this year $20,000, $30,000 to come in and chop my 50, 60 acres of silage. I said, and if I'm going to have to turn around and buy this equipment, I said, so in 2 years, by the time what I pay for this equipment or pay for the custom chopping, I said, I could buy me an old chopper, and a couple trucks, whatever. And so I did. I got on the hunt, and I found this old chopper that a tornado had went through, and we took the cab off of it, and we replaced the cab and got this old thing working. And man, and I ain't saying it was the greatest chopper by any means, but anyway, we run that old chopper for about 2 or 3 years. And, we chopped our own silage. And then when everybody knew that I'd bought this old chopper, when everybody found out that the other boys were leaving, then they started calling, hey, would you mind chopping our corn? Would you mind chopping our corn? Well, how many acres you got? Next thing I know, we're up to about 400, 500, 600 acres of corn. And well, this old 6-row 6610 chopper is just not going to keep up. And so I get to looking, and it was crunch time. Jacob, it's July the 15th or something. And I find this chopper on Big Iron in Kansas, and I buy this thing on the whim. I called the banker and I said, hey, I need to borrow some money. He said, what have you done? I said, I just bought a chopper in something, Kansas. He said, you bought a what? A helicopter? I said, no, not a helicopter. I said, a chopper. I said, a silage chopper. He said, well, how much was it? I said, well, man, $180,000, $90,000. He's like, you did what? I hadn't called the banker. I hadn't called nobody. So anyway, he said, whatever, get it. So I get to scrambling, right? And I find a couple trucks. I find these old trucks over in Missouri. We go over here and buy these old trucks in Missouri, and I drag this thing home. We get it all home. We get it off the truck. I've never driven anything like this in my life. Man from Bradford's calling. Hey, I don't need you to come chop my corn. I'm like, all right, when's it going to be ready? A couple weeks? No, tomorrow. Like, we need you here tomorrow. I'm like, oh my gosh, so I'm just panicking. So anyway, we get this chopper off. We check the oil in it, check the gearboxes in it. Hey, we take off. Just take off, And so we take off over there and we chop this corn. Man, and it's just a lot of trial and error. I had never had one, and we just got in there and got after it and made things happen. And hey, we tore some stuff up, and we had some learning curves, and we're no professionals by any means. But last year, I think we ended up chopping just a little over 800 acres, and this year I've had some more people call. We've probably picked up another couple hundred. I think we're going to be pushing close to 1,000 acres this fall of corn. And I actually bought a header this week, a hay head, and this week in Wisconsin. We're going to pick that up, and we're going to make haylage here in a couple weeks. And so, that was one of those things where I had to sit down and look at it, where I could either pay somebody $20,000-$30,000 a year to come and do it, or I could turn it into another revenue stream. And so I took that revenue stream, and I took that $20,000 or $30,000 that we would be paying out, and I've turned that into, and I don't mean, when I say this, I don't mean profit by any way. These are not no net numbers, because we have payments and insurance and fuel and all those things. But I mean, we're bringing in, $150,000, $200,000 a year worth of cash flow. And plus, we're getting our own silage chopped. We're getting all that put up. And so, we've got a 30 to 45 day window there that we're generating another income. And this year we didn't have many breakdowns. We had really good running weather because obviously it didn't rain the whole month of August. And so we were able to get a lot done. Now, there on the end, it was really stressful. Everybody thought we were in good shape. We thought the corn was planted out right. We wasn't going to have to push just really hard. And everybody knows how the end of August was. It didn't rain, and everybody's corn just dramatically turned in a 2-week time there. I mean, it went from solid green to ready to shell. And, and so we were pushing really hard to try to get all that corn cut for everybody, because we understand, the dairy side of me understands that your feed quality, if you ain't got good feed, you ain't got nothing. And so I took a lot of pride in that, to be able to try and get that done and get it done for them in a timely manner and get their feed put up, because even the beef guy, quality feed's going to make quality animals, and these things are too high to be just halfway doing it. And so we want to get those guys that's feeding cattle. We wanted to make sure that they had a good product to put in there to get the growth on those calves that they needed. And we wanted to make sure that the milkman, that they had good components in there to build a ration off of that was suitable for dairy.
And that's a great call out, Brent. Shoot, that was exactly my reaction when Brandon had texted me that he had gotten a hold of you, because he was sweating for a while over getting somebody there before it turned into sawdust, essentially. Yeah. And when he said that, I was like, oh, and you got somebody. And the haylage side, because that is such a huge factor of knowing moistures where they should be, and that not just a race to the barn, to understand there's a value system to how it's going to feed based on how you make it. So that's one of the things that I think goes a long way hand in hand with your main thing, is understanding, well, this is how to put it away and make quality versus simply rush through the job. So yeah, that was really good. I was just gonna let you go till you finished on that.
It's rambling some days.
No, that's great. It is. So then you've got auctions, and I mean, it's almost like, it seems like you have 2 or 3 a month a lot of times, that you're having auctions between state auctions, and then you're having big ones, and you have a big sale auction. I wanted to make sure I give you a plug. That's like in not tomorrow, but the following Saturday. Am I right?
Well, tomorrow we've got 285 acres we're selling. plus a house, plus a full line of hay equipment for Mr. Dwayne Dove's estate down outside of Bells, Tennessee. And then next weekend, we've got our annual spring consignment auction at the fairgrounds at Trenton. So everybody bring your, if you got some used equipment you need to sell or some surplus of whatever, just bring it down to the fairgrounds. We have those. We'll have 2 to 3 of those auctions a year. We usually try to have one the first weekend of December every year, and then usually the first weekend or second weekend of March. And then we'll have 2 or 3, other dispersals throughout the year. I hadn't put this one out yet. I booked another farm auction this week. We're going to have another farm auction. I think it's Tuesday, April the 14th. We've got another farmer we're selling out that's retiring from row crop. So yeah, the auction business is booming. The auction business is wide open. Of course, we handle everything from estates to farm equipment. We try to do a lot of real estate, try to primarily stay around the real estate and the agriculture side of it. The auction business is a service industry. And I think that the service industry goes back to service industries just like custom shopping. You've got to be there when those people need you. And the auction business is just like my farm business. I bragged on my boys earlier. My auction business is the same way. I've got a great partner who runs our office every day. We've got a great staff in our office. I've got a good lady that runs our office. I've got a great assistant that handles, getting all my auction paperwork and everything ready. And then I've got a team on the ground. A guy named Jay Patterson heads up my auction team. And he handles getting everything ready for me. The auction set up, the auction work done. We've got a marketing team. I've got transaction coordinators, that do all of our real estate work for us. And that allows me to, this stupid thing right here is my life. And I hate it. Like I hate it because it takes away, so much from other aspects of my life, but it's liable to ring at 5:30 in the morning. It's liable to ring at 10:30, 11:30 at night, 2:00 in the morning. They don't care. The people sitting on auction time or equipment fax, tractor house, whatever. People from Canada. I guess the people in Canada don't sleep because they call it 2:00 in the morning. Hey, what about this planter guy? And I'm like, what the heck are you doing, man? It's 2:00 in the morning, and they don't care. And the world don't stop. And so, yeah, I mean, the auction business. I'm gonna tell you, the auction business has been good to me, and it's about service. It's about taking care of our clients, taking care of our customers, taking care of the people that buy from us. This year, well, in the last 3 months, December, we had David Grant's farm retirement sale the Friday after Thanksgiving, I think it was, okay? Between that one, our sale the first Saturday in December, and then Mr. Knox's retirement sale that we had the last week of December, we've shipped equipment to probably 32 states out of the 50 in the continental United States, and to probably 6 or 7 countries, including Canada, Mexico, Russia, South Africa. The auction business deal is just an absolute worldwide phenomenon, and we just get to play in it, and it's just amazing. I mean, tomorrow's a tough day. If you get on my Facebook and you get on my Facebook page and on my auction company page and you watch all these people, and I got a bunch of people mad at me, right? They're all mad at me because we're selling this farm. And, it's a touchy subject for me because I've grew up in the agricultural side. I understand the agricultural side, and the family root side of it just absolutely runs deep to me. But people want to get on there and they're mad at me because, that's another farm gone to a subdivision. And that's not the case. And I want people to understand that sometimes when I split a farm up, I'm not splitting that farm up to try to sell it for a subdivision. I'm splitting that farm up because there's 5 family members that's in that farm, and one of them would like to be able to try to buy a piece of that farm to be able to keep part of their damn family farm. But the other people, the outside world, don't understand that most people can't afford to buy out the older generation. And when you have stepchildren and stepbrothers and stepsisters and aunts, uncles, and this, that, and the other, it just don't work. And so I'm going to say this like from the auction side of it. Before you get on somewhere bad-mouthing the auction company or bad-mouthing the real estate company, and I'm not saying all of them because I hate realtors. I hate them with a passion. And I've said that 1,000 times, and I get in trouble for saying that. But, understand the situation. Talk to the guy. Go see what, because, I mean, hey, how many brothers and sisters do you have?
I've just got the one.
You just got one. All right. But if something happens to mom and dad, is one, if you're in a situation where there's 5 of you, like what we're selling tomorrow, can one person typically ever buy that out? Probably not. I mean, we've got a $2.5–3 million estate that we're selling tomorrow. One person can't buy that out. And so by busting that up, we are trying to help them be able to preserve part of their family farm. And so, that's I got off on a rabbit hole there, but there's a whole lot that goes into that people don't understand. And so, yes, the family wants to get all the money they can get, or the bank, whoever you're selling for. Not the case tomorrow, but typically the bank. Typically when we sell some of these, the states there, the bank, whoever, they need to get all the money they can get because we have eat up equity, and this will go back into the other side of it. Things that I'm seeing from the auction side. The banks have lent so much money to keep some farmers going that they've eat up equity on their ground. They've eat up the equity in their equipment. Well, equipment's off 20%. So if equipment's off 20%, land prices have fallen some. Land prices, I'm going to say, are down 15 to 20% as well in the last year. Or I'm going to say in the last 6 months, because we sold some farms last spring that I thought was high. And then, hey, for instance, I sold a farm last spring in March, right across the road, brings $7,300 an acre. Sell a farm last fall in November, right across the road from the same exact farm, same man buys it, and it brings $4,900 an acre. So, granted, it was a bigger tract, but the markets have shifted, things have shifted. But the other side of it is, on the real estate side of it, the farmer can't pay for it. The farmer can't pay 6%, 6.5%, 7% interest, and with the markets and the input costs the way that they are, they can't pay for it. It's not there. It's not feasible. So it goes back to, again, what we talked about earlier, the young farmer. How does the young farmer get started? If granddaddy don't help him, if daddy don't help him, he can't. I mean, if he don't inherit some ground that's already paid for or whatnot, he can't get started. I just don't see how it works.
Yeah. Oh, it's back to, and I've got and if I hadn't told you his name, you'd probably know him, but a kid down in Brownsville that was a hired kid to an older gentleman that passed away, and the family worked, and that was probably one of the coolest situations. And the kid was already trying to do his own thing on the side, so he was already making some strides before the old gentleman passed away. The family allowed him to keep his base of operations on this old man's property and give him like a really I won't say really generous terms. I guess they are now based on what cattle prices are, but really worked with him to try to allow him, because those were kids that were probably 50 to 55 at that age. They knew they weren't farming. They just wanted to come up with something. But you just don't see that as much as you would think. But in fairness, that kid worked really hard for that old gentleman, and it was just a good situation. But you don't see it. It's not commonplace, I guess, and you would know that more. Something else, and it's just a follow up to what you were saying. I think talking about, how available you've got to be to these people. If you're helping people sell out estates, if you're helping people, close a chapter of their lives, I think there's so much to be said for that service before, during, and after the sale, because it's just so emotionally charged for them on what they're having to go through and deal with from the perspective of what they're perceiving as what they gave up in life, or what they're giving up, or what they're losing, especially those memories or things of that nature when it comes down to it. And I think that's something that you, with your farming background, probably have a little bit more of a special read on it, I guess, compared to, without having that background. So that's all. I just wanted to shout that out, because that was a really good call out that you had.
Well, I understand the relationships that these people have with their land. I understand relationships of the kids that grew up on the family farm. I grew up in the 80s, in the early 90s, on a dairy farm. Okay. And so, I know what tight times look like. I had 3 kids, in 2008, 2009, my wife and I just bought the farm where we live at now in 2007, and had 3 kids in diapers, all under the age of 4. And I get it. We went through a time right there that, you didn't know what really to do, and where to look to next, and you just had to keep grinding. And so I know what it's like to be through a tough time. And so when I see these other people struggling and going through a tough time or whatnot, I want to be there to try to give them a helping hand and try to help them, get through that. And so that is part of that service part of it. And so I just want to try to be there for folks to help them. And that means a whole lot to me to be able to reach out there and either give somebody some advice, or try to get them out of a tight spot.
Yeah, and I guarantee you they appreciate you having that. Um, so we've kind of touched on the land side, and you briefly touched on the equipment side. What about that market? You mentioned that it's starting to drop off a little bit. Why? Why? Like there seems like there's hay equipment everywhere for sale right now, and I would almost expect that we'll continue to see more and more of the big equipment being for sale. And I just had a guy coming back from Sykeston, Missouri yesterday, and was saying that the auction lots were packed full of newer model tractors. So yeah, I got that last night. I said, guess what I'm asking tomorrow?
Yeah. I think it's where you've got farmers who are trying to turn in some leases. They're getting trying to get some leases rolled off of them. They're going to have to go back and farm more this year with less. Your newer tractors, your bigger payments, they're having to cut corners, and so they're trying to shed some expenses. They're trying to generate some cash flow by not having to make some payments. The dealerships have livened up to the fact of, hey, we can't trade out of payments right now because people would come in and trade just to roll a payment over and finance that longer. Well, I've done a lot of work for John Deere Financial. I've worked with Case. I've worked with the ag credits, and all those top places that are financing this equipment, and they're overloaded, and they've got a lot of bad debt sitting out there, and so they're not wanting to trade and finance just to roll people out of payments. And so they're saying, hey, so the next thing is, well, what are we going to do? Well, now they're bringing it to the auction lots to try to get rid of some of this stuff, to get some payments freed up or to generate some cash flow. A lot of them are trying to generate some cash flow to catch up on lines of credit from last year, to get a line of credit. It's amazing to me the number of farmers who are fixing to go to sticking seed in the ground within the next 21 days that do not have a line of credit set up, that are still trying to figure it out, to dig out from last year. And so, that to me, that's just setting up for disaster. I think that's pretty scary to be thinking that, I hope that they've gone and talked to their bankers and have an understanding of what's going on. But I mean, I know that there's some that they hadn't, and I talked to a lot of financial people, a lot of bankers, around, and, they call me and ask, they say, hey, what's your opinion on land? This, that, and the other. We're trying to redo these lines of credit, and we got to have them, what's going to happen there. So, but to the equipment side of it, yeah, I think you're going to see a lot more equipment on the market. I still think you're going to see some more auctions that's going to be coming this spring that you don't know is coming yet. I think there's some people that's sitting here right now that think they're going to plant a crop this year that's not. And so I think you're going to see some more rent, more ground up for rent. And the markets have changed the rent around here. I'm going to say that, I know of some farms that's been rented here locally the last 2 or 3 weeks, and everybody said, hey, the $200 an acre ground right now here for non-irrigated ground, it's over. They can't pay it, and they're not going to. And I think that the farmers, they're still actively seeking the ground, but they're not wanting to just run out there and put themselves out on a limb, because if it pencils to lose money, why would I want the extra ground to lose more money? So I think that's part of it. I think it just goes back to the whole cycle of the ag communities. just suffering a little bit right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. So let me ask a fun question that I've asked a couple of people. I asked Dad on this, and I couldn't. It's hard to get Dad on camera, but I asked Dad on camera a couple months ago what he thought about row croppers putting cattle out. How many of these people that we're talking about with the line of credits are going to say, well, you know what, let me just throw out some of the cheap sorghum sedan or throw something like that out cheap and get a hold of some calves or do a lease deal with my neighbor's cows as far as working something that way? How much is it? But what I would almost challenge my own self with this question is, we've ripped out so many fence rows in West Tennessee in the last, since we've been here, but I would say in the last 10 years, 15 years, ripped out so many fence rows. I don't know who's got any infrastructure left unless they're already in that business.
Yeah, you said the word I was fixing to say. I was fixing to say the infrastructure for the cattle industry here in Northwest Tennessee and especially Southwest Tennessee, it's gone. When soybeans hit $10, probably in the late 90s, early 2000s, and every farmer had them a Traco, you could see it leaving. And so, like I said a while ago, talking with a lot of the financial people, I've talked with, several bankers, and I said, I'm just guessing today that your farmers who are in the best financial shape are the ones who are diversified and who have cattle still on the farm. Every banker there said yes. Said the cattle this year have carried the shortfalls, not necessarily completely, but have carried the shortfalls for the row crop for the farm. For the loss that they had, the ones who were in cattle, they were either background in calves or had the cow and calf operations, that they were the ones that were going to succeed and easier to get a game plan because they could actually figure a profit on the cattle. So that was going to be able to help them keep rolling on the row crop side this year because they could actually figure a profit on something for the farm. And the other part of it is, how do you get back into it at this point with fencing cost and the cost that it's going to take to put up, to put I'm looking right now. So I just bought a farm and I'm looking at the part of it's got some hill on it. And so I was looking at, 25 acres maybe of Bermuda grass on this hilly part. And then maybe looking at some alfalfa seed to put on the other part because it's got a pivot on it. Well, the cost per acre to put this grass in, it's stout, and so if you take that and then you take back, and then you go to looking at the fencing side of it, you could very easily have $600-700 an acre to get it back in grass and get a fence around. Probably more than that. I hadn't studied it that close, but I'm going to say at least $700-800 an acre to be able to get a good stand of grass back on the farm and then put a fence around it. But on the other side of it, I still don't know that it don't cash flow better than a soybean crop with $5 400-pound calves.
Well, this is very true. And you're talking about, I think it was at Trenton, just a month ago, 5 weights were up over $5 a pound down there. And I was like, at little old Trenton, that's incredible. They
had cow and calves Wednesday bringing $4,400 to $4,600. So the cattle market's just nuts at the moment. I sold baby calves this week. I sold a baby calf and didn't top the sale and bring 15 and a quarter for a calf on Tuesday. Holstein bull calf, sat there and watched it, and people don't believe this. I get it. I have local people call me, want to buy a baby calf, and I say, hey guys, I really don't want to sell you a calf. And they say, well, why? I said, because you're not going to want to pay. You're fixing to think I'm crazy. But when a Holstein bull calf bringing $1,400 at 3 days old, you're like, why? I've bought many of them for $5, $10, $15 a piece, gone by farms, and they just give them to you to get them out of the way so they don't have to feed them. And they're worth that right now. And so on the dairy side of things, I think that's probably what's going to carry the dairy market. That's what's going to make the profit on the dairy farm this year. We're milking cows to sell calves.
The meeting that we had in town last fall for the co-op, the local, or not local, the milk co-op.
Oh,
well, okay. Since you're the guest, you can say it. I was going to not, but okay.
Whatever. I don't care.
They were talking about people holding on to call cows if they were in just to get another beef calf out. And they were asking us all these questions in there. And I said, we just had a 2-hour meeting talking about how the price of milk is at 20-year low again, another one. And and I said, you think that we can afford to hold a cow for an extra 9 months for the calf when the call cows are up at $1.50? And then I just checked the market report for, so it would have been last week's market report for Smith Grove, and it's still like, and like the low end call cows at over $1.50. I was like, what are we talking about here?
Yeah. I mean, I sold some this week in the $1.60, $1.60 for a decent cow.
Yeah,
And
it's
so when calls are at $2,500 a piece, baby calves are at $1,500 a piece. It's an interesting time to be in the dairy business, I'll tell you. I mean, but on the other side of it, Jacob, I mean, I've always been the type of guy that I didn't mind buying a cow or whatnot, would reach out on a limb and buy some heifers or whatever. Okay, so we can sit right here and we can sit here and buy a potload of heifers for $3,500 a piece. That's bred to Angus. All right, so hey, we know if we calve in 35 heifers, we're going to lose a couple calves. It's just going to happen. It's just part of it. But if you can average, just say take an average of $1,200 a piece, back out of those calves. Well, if you bought those heifers, so now we're back down to $2,200-$2,300, fresh heifers. I mean, that don't sound crazy to me. Sounds pretty appeasing, really.
Thank you. See, this is what you mentioned when you came on here and we started talking, and you started talking about being a risk taker. This is my math, and I've got a seed customer that last fall he wanted to go in and just start buying older cows that he was going to be able to get them bought right, that were maybe bred, but he'd have to get them through the winter. Well, then about November, they started climbing up pretty significantly to when he first started talking to me about this. It seemed like they got those late model cows, those older cows were getting higher. And he didn't buy as many as he wanted to, and he was kind of fussing to me about the price on some 3-in-1s not real long ago. And I'm over here going, well, my math says that works. If you're buying even a 5 to 6 year 3-in-1, 6-year-old 3-in-1, you should be able to get, well, you've got one calf on the ground, you get the second one, and you should be able to get 2 more viable pregnancies out of that cow before you call her on a good beef cow. I'm over here going, that math works for me.
Right. Well,
and
so it's the same thing. I've got a partner. We didn't even talk about this, but I mean, I've got another partner that we're partnering a farm, and then I buy him cows. I buy him beef cows every week, or not every week, but like last year, I'm gonna say we probably bought 60 or 70 cows last year and turned them out. You sit there and I was buying 6-month plus bred cows, older cows, getting those calves out of them. Well, he just sold those calves. Well, the calves averaged $2,400-$2,500 a piece. Well, that's all I give for the cow, and so the cow's profit. I mean, yeah, you got a little hay and feed, and whatnot in her, but it's as crazy as it is, as crazy as the markets is, if you have a little willpower, a little work ethic, and the capabilities of doing it, there's still money to be made. And you're not going to make that money sitting on your hands. You've got to get out and you've got to do something to try it. And, you got to get out and beat the bush, but there's still deals out there. There's still deals to be found. There's still deals to be made. Does a $3,000 cow make sense? Well, if she weighs 1,200 and she's worth $1.60 across the scales and she gives you a $2,500 calf, she made $400. What else have you done that you made $400 on? What's the profit margin right now on a feeder calf? $300, maybe.
yeah.
I mean, I don't like the feeder cattle deal because I ain't never I don't have that time to be there. But you take a 7, 8, 10-year-old cow out there and turn her out. That cow knows how to live. She's been doing it for 10 years. She knows how to live. And we can feed them old beef cow, feed them old cows once a day and check on them, and they're going to be fine. And most of them old cows at that point in life, they're going to lay down, have a calf, and they're going to be okay. Yeah, you're going to lose one occasionally, part of it. But I mean, I think the older cow deal is a way to go. I've got a buddy in Nebraska, and they buy them every year. And I think I talked to him the other day. He had 1,000 of them, 1,000 older cows that they calving in right now, and it's been working for them for years. But I mean, they're getting higher too, and I mean, I think you just kind of have to have your set of numbers at what makes it work and work for you to be able to sit down and do the math on it and figure it. Now, if this market changes, if this market crashes overnight, it could be rough, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're looking at probably a good 3 years of this deal. I think they're probably at least a good 3 years and another 3 years in the beef deal. And I think on the beef side of it, that's going to run this dairy side of it. And we're talking about the beef calves, the beef on dairy. But a question that I have, you and I both milk cows. What's that going to do to our dairy replacements? Where's our dairy herd going to be? What's that going to do to a long-term projection on our milk price? I don't see how we can't see higher dollar milk in the next 24 months because I don't think we're going to have the replacements to put there. What you already said a while ago was I think we've got some older stock. I think you've got people that have kept cows that they wouldn't be keeping to try to get another calf out of them to sell a calf. I've got some cows right now that's turned out on a pasture. They ain't costing me a whole lot. But it's cheaper for me to try to get them bred back, freshen them back in, is to try to replace them at $3,500 a piece. And so I think we've got a little bit of an older cow herd, and with this beef on dairy, is the amount of sex semen we're using, is it that great that we're being able to keep up with our heifer numbers through the use of sex semen and then going to all the other beef on dairy? Is that how we're keeping up with our heifers? Or are we going to wake up here in about 2 years and we're going to be like, hey, there's no heifers anywhere? And I think we're already there. I mean, when you got just common everyday heifers bringing 35 to 3,800, but then again, you sit there and you do the math with a $1,500 calf, $1,200 to $1,500 calf out of them. They still make sense.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you remember Jack Holbrook?
Yes. Yep. Lynn Lee's person, right? That was who Lynn Lee came up under.
So, Mr. Jack always said that a heifer was worth whatever, if milk's worth $20, a good heifer's worth $2,000. And, that was kind of always the rule of thumb. A real good one, she might bring 10 to 20% more. So with that being said, if you get that calf out of that cow and we're at $20 milk, you're right back where, the old saying that it comes right back around. And so if you got 2,000 to 2,400 in that fresh heifer, and I say that, and I know that I'm changing that rule. I'm bending that rule a little bit because used to you talking about buy a good fresh heifer for that. And so I'm bending that rule a little bit in that because I'm taking that money back because used to those calves were worth $5, $10, $15, $50, and now they're worth $1,500. So I'm bending that rule a little bit to make that rule work. But still, I mean, if you got them in, you got them calved in right and whatnot.
Yeah, it's the math. The math can math pretty quick, and you just did it. And I guess it really you solved so many of my questions for me because I was going to ask you, and you just kept rolling. It was perfect, man. That was great. I was going to ask how bullish you are on the cattle. That 3 years, like that's about where I see as well, and that still begs the question. And you did on the dairy side, but I do on the beef side. Where are they coming from if we're replacing the herd?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see our population as far as our human population to quit growing. I don't see the demand for beef to quit being there. I don't see. I had a conversation yesterday with your neighbor Will about us trying to get some milk machines put in the rest of the schools here in West Tennessee. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm a fan of everything that President Trump has done, and I ain't going to get political on your podcast. But I think I knew going into it when he was elected for that next term, everybody was thinking that we were going to have a 6-month turnaround. He couldn't turn around in 6 months, and I told him, I told everybody I talked to, I said, look, you're going to have to give him a year and a half in office to be able to turn to be able to get some things done to make it work, to make it go, And so, here's I'm pulling up my markets right now already this morning, okay? November beans as of right now at 7:44 this morning are at 11:43 on the board. And so I was tickled to death the other day. I went ahead and sold some when I knew I could get $11. The corn market this morning for December corn, is at 480 on the board for December corn. So you're going to put 450, 460, depends on where you're going. You could put that in your pocket this morning. And so FSA numbers, I wish I had that in here. I don't have it in here. It's on the dash of my truck. I've got a set of projected numbers from FSA as to what they were predicting, and they're using FSA numbers is telling the banks to use like 1160 something for beans this fall. So I don't know where the heck they come up with that number at all of a sudden. Well, now you look at the board this morning. Well, hey, maybe that's going to work. They were using $22 milk. FSA numbers was using $22 milk for 2026. Well, it's a far cry from where we're at this morning, but maybe it's going to work. Is this war in Iran? Is that going to pump up our soy diesel? Or are we going to go back to punting the soybeans in the diesel to get this oil price down a little bit? I mean, hey, let's think outside the box here a little bit. But my opinion, I think our agricultural deal looks a whole lot better than it did 12 months ago. They've got some payments put out, and they've got some other things put out for some of the farmers. Some bridge loans and bridge payments, and and the flood payment that they got the other day. I'm sure some of the cattle guys. I'm sure y'all got one. I don't know if I'm guessing y'all's county qualified.
Weekly County or Carroll County did. I don't know that we did.
Okay.
Not actually.
But I do think that I think the government's done some things to try to help, to help the farmers get some things done, to make it work, make it go.
And I've made this point a couple of times that it's taken us a really long time to get to the place that we currently are. Economically, it's going to hurt to try to get back.
100%. I got a brother that's in the trucking industry, and and when he says the trucking industry's dead, that means that there ain't nothing moving. And so, that's a good indicator of our economy and where we're at. And so we're not moving goods up and down the road. So we know that people ain't out buying and ain't out spending. I didn't see, for instance, this spring with the cars, right now you would think that you would see car lots everywhere with deals of people buying cars. The people ain't out buying the cars with their income tax this year. I think they're, buying necessities and trying to get caught up on bills and whatnot. And so, I think it's going to take them just a little bit longer to get some things turned around. But are really good. I do think the ag thing's looking up. I think we're looking at a better 2026, obviously, than we did 2025. Now, granted, the weather could train wreck that deal again. July the 15th this last year, I had about 200 something acres, 220, 30 acres of beans. And man, I was just, I was ready to go. I'm thinking these beans fixed to make 55, 60 bushels. And, the good Lord turned the water off. And we cut 29 bushels, and we ended up averaging 29 bushels. And as disheartened as I was still thankful that I was a whole lot better than some of them 10s and 12s that I heard from around here, and so everything can line up. The markets could be right, but if we ain't got the weather, it can still train wreck itself too.
There's a whole lot of contingencies in farming for sure, and we can only control a small portion of those.
Well, I think it goes back to that gambling deal. You get up and gamble every morning. You gamble every time you pull the planter out. You gamble every time you calve a heifer in. You gamble every time you do anything. I mean, this whole deal is a gamble. So, I mean, that's why I just don't be too scared to take that chance, sometimes.
Yeah, that's a really good way to look at that, because you're already doing it regardless. You might as well do it big enough to win a little bit.
Well, I told the banker the other day, I said, hey, used to owed you $100,000. I said, you kind of had me. I said, now I owe you about $2.5 million. I said, now I kind of got you. I said, so what we're going to do now? He said, we're going to roll. What we're going to do?
I had a guy in California tell me that one time. That was his whole family's philosophies. If the bank owned, if they owned 51%, the bank owned 49. They never let the bank off the hook. So, hey, Brent, I appreciate your time. I'm trying to keep it under that hour, I promised you, and we're like right up against it. So I really enjoyed this. I really appreciate you getting on. It was a little bit shorter notice on when we worked this in. Thanks for the insights, man. I really appreciate you stopping by around the fence post.
Well, I appreciate you having me, and I feel sorry for anybody that had to sit here that they had nothing else to do for this hour but sit here and listen to you and I ramble on. But if they did, I sure enjoyed it, Jacob, and I appreciate you and your family and what y'all do to continue the dairy farming family and everything there. And, and I know you're out selling seed and doing some other things to make it all work. And so I just appreciate anybody that sticks to it, that family farm, and works on. And if we can ever help y'all, just let us know, whether it's chopping corn or selling junk tractors or, whatever. We just give me a call. We'll have something to figure out how to make something work for you if we can.
Thank you, Brent. We'll talk to you.
Thank you. Good to see you, bud.
As we wrap up today's episode, we hope something we shared helped you, challenged you, or gave you a new perspective. If even one moment stood out, please share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. That's how this community grows, one conversation at a time. You can find us as Around the Fence Post on Facebook and Wet Meadows Seed on Facebook and Instagram. We appreciate you being here. We'll see you next time, Around the Fence Post.